some Lolita related topics, specifically some Lolita controversies, as I've been perusing the Reddit forums and I've come across a few juicy topics that I would like to touch on. So, the overall theme for what I'll be talking about today is different styles in which darker themes are turned cutesy, because there's quite a few of those. So, to start off with, what I've named this live stream of Lolita outfits gone sexual. I want to talk about a style called Aero Lolita, and it does basically stand for erotic Lolita. And I feel like that name is really just not doing it any favors. So it's seen as this sort of sexy Lolita style. So it's very, a lot of people have some weird feelings about it. But really, the only thing that makes it sexy is just it tends to have shorter dresses or skirts and like an off the shoulder blouse, rather than being more covered. And I feel like that's really not that sexy. Like it's giving very Victorian era. Her ankles were showing. So I just think that's kind of silly because I really don't think that that's anyone trying to be overly sexual in any manner. I especially don't think that it's anyone trying to sexualize Lolita fashion. And I've seen a lot of people talking about this on Reddit in which they're saying, oh, this is just trying to appeal to the male gaze, or is because it's sexy, that's therefore not Lolita at all, because Lolita should never be sexy. A lot of hard feelings about this style. And I mean, even this comment that I'm looking at right now, um, if it's not executed perfectly, then it's a complete disaster. I can count on the number of good chords I've seen in 3 years on two fingers. That's kind of crazy because just looking up on Google Images, Aero Lolita, there's a lot of really good chords on there. Um, I think it's odd that so many Lolitas want to limit the style to these very, very strict standards of what it needs to look like, what your silhouette needs to look like, what the cut of your dress and your blouse and your accessories, like the whole shebang. It has to be so neat and put together. And I think part of the issue is people often, or at least people within the Lolita community, they'll refer to Lolita as like a modest feminine style. And I think the word modest gets used very, very loosely when it comes to people talking within the subculture. Because the way that I see it is modest can be used to describe the style in a sense of like elegance and feminine. And yes, some of the dresses can be modest in the sense that they're like longer dresses, longer sleeves. So it's modest in the idea that you're more covered up. Um, but I don't think that Lolita is supposed to mean modest in the idea of like a traditional kind of sense. So I mean, even with plenty of cords, like your legs are still going to be exposed if you're wearing a short sleeve blouse. Your arms are going to be exposed. Like there's still skin showing within most people's outfits. Not to mention, like OG Lolita brands from the 90s have been releasing dresses that are honestly kind of like mini skirts. Or I've even seen they'll have a hoop skirt, one of those cage hoop skirts, but it's open in the front, and then the person will be wearing like ruffle bloomer shorts underneath. So they're still, you know, they're not showing cheeks out on the street, but they are like experimenting with the silhouette of Lolita and I guess technically more exposed. But, I think that's interesting. I think playing around with the different components of a Lolita outfit, like the cut of the skirt, like your petticoat, like bloomer shorts underneath, whatever else, that's really cool and that can make you stand out. And even a brand in more recent times that released a dress, I'm gonna say it wrong, but it's Atelier Purot. Um, Fantastic brand. I love their stuff. They released an Aero Lolita dress. I can't remember if it was a jumper skirt or full dress, but it was made with leather. So that's, I think, more so what I equate with Aero Lolita is what we see in Western goth fashion because I'm gonna connect the two. You gotta hear me out here. Um, in Western Gothic fashion, we see what would technically be considered fetish wear. So you have corsets, leather, fishnets, sometimes even like lingerie pieces, things that like on their own are technically sexy clothes, but they're incorporated in a gothic manner into gothic fashion. And especially today with goth fashion being more normalized, you're not going to look at someone wearing a goth outfit, like I said, with a corset or leather or fishnets or whatever else and be like, "Oh my god, they're dressing sexy. They're trying to make it sexy." Like, if anything, we're trying to destigmatize goth and let people know, like, hey, this is not meant to be a sexy thing. We just like to dress up. So I think in that same idea, like I said, Era Lolita generally tends to be a little bit more gothic in appearance in general. Like the chords that I see do have like mostly black, or to be especially like red and black. So if anything, it's more of like a romantic goth style if you want to get specific. Because especially you'll see a lot of like floral lace and things like that, roses, all that good stuff. So I personally just see Aero Lolita as kind of a, like I said, romantic goth Lolita. And just because it includes some of those goth, like Western goth aspects, like I said, corsets and the other types of like fishnets and tights and everything, I think people just kind of, they don't like how that looks with Lolita, and to them they see that as like trying to turn Lolita sexy, which I just don't think is the case. Um, so I don't know. Obviously teach their own, but me personally, I think it's a great style. I'm always going to advocate for experimentation within styles. So 10 out of 10 from me. Now, moving on, we got something especially more controversial. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of a little thing called military Lolita. Um, Now, it's funny being an insider within the Lolita subculture and then thinking of what people not in the subculture might think of some of our styles, because I think if an outsider were to just hear the term military Lolita, they'd be like, huh? you know? So I guess it might sound a little odd, but essentially, military Lolita is just military-esque or military inspired like uniforms, but in a Lolita dress format. So let me see if I can show you guys a nice little example here. Um, so something just super generic, just gonna basically something like this. It resembles a military uniform in terms of like the army green and, like I said, the kind of uniform cut, but it still has the Lolita dress silhouette of the cupcake shaped dress and like the cute short sleeves and whatever. So, um, that's an example of what I would say is like just a good, solid, simple military Lolita. Unfortunately, there have been some very not so great releases of military Lolita. Um, if you are familiar with Monosama, I've talked about him in my last video. Um, his brand that he owns released a drop that not only was it just a dress, I think it was two dresses and a skirt. They also dropped what was essentially just a straight up military uniform. Like it kind of was just like a one-to-one almost costume. And they did look like a certain military uniform from a certain period of time during World War II. A certain guy with a mustache, if you know what I'm getting at. Yeah, very not bad. Sorry, very not good. Super bad. Definitely was just a clearly uninformed release of them almost recreating a specific like pre-existing military uniform from real life of very bad things that happened. I'm trying to keep it PG here, but I hope you guys catch my drifts. Um, so I think that release specifically really didn't help the people's feelings about military Lolita because in general, okay, I'll say at the very least, for the most part, people do actually like the style. They like the idea of just like the overall uniform look turned into a dress, kind of taking this like formal attire and making it cutesy, especially because then that can steer towards like dark academia, which a lot of people really like it as well. So I think it's overall just an interest in, like I said, the kind of uniform esque look. It's just more so military uniforms. Um, so for the most part, people like it, but on the other hand, there's a lot of people that don't like it so much because one, they feel as though you shouldn't be taking something such as war and war uniforms and putting it into a very cutesy feminine style like Lolita. Um, and I get that, I see that, but personally, I don't think it's that big of a deal as long as you are not, again, like that one brand did, as long as you're not making one-to-one recreations of pre-existing army uniforms. You're not, because then it feels like a costume, it feels like you're just cosplaying a soldier from a specific army in a point in time, and obviously, war is bad, guys. We probably shouldn't be cosplaying war stuff. Um, so, on the other hand, I think if you more so create like a fictional military uniform, so like like a military uniform that you see like an anime character wearing, where like they have their own fictional universe, their own fictional army, and whatever else going on. But their military uniforms that they wear don't look like any pre-existing army uniforms, and also just have a bit more, not exactly fantasy elements to it, but I guess like just fictional elements where you can see that it's like more anime-esque. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm gonna try to I'm gonna show y'all an example. Um there was a actually, once again, shout out Adelaire Pirot, because they had a release. Um I lied. I completely just lied to you. It's called Yupro Coronation of My Princess. This right here, I think, is a fantastic example of a very nice, super fire military Lolita outfit done correctly. Obviously, the color palette being nothing like a pre existing army uniform, that definitely helps. The kind of side cape situation, that's really cool. Um, I've even seen other releases where it was like a black uniform, but it had cherry blossoms all over. Excuse me. So because even to this slight offshoot, but if you're familiar with Sailor Lolita, that is yet another substyle of Lolita. Obviously, I guess sailor uniforms would technically be considered military uniforms in a way. Sailor Lolita, at least from what I've seen, tends to be like very, very cutesy. They also try to go more into the like ocean motifs. So you have like the anchors, or maybe like a fish or seashells or whatever, things to make it stand out that it's not meant to just be like, again, a one-to-one recreation of an existing uniform. It's just kind of drawing bits of inspiration from uniforms, but it makes it its own thing. Um, so that that for the most part is what people don't like, is again, like I said, the one unfortunate collection that was released, and obviously was just objectively bad. But I think people have started to come around a bit more to it. They're more open and accepting of military Lolita. So that's super cool. Now, one thing I also wanted to talk about that people still are not as accepting of, yet another substyle of Lolita. It's called bittersweet Lolita. Um, Now, if you know anything about Lolita, you'll know that one of the top three categories is just Sweet Lolita. Once again, I talked about this in my previous video, but just to summarize, Sweet Lolita, it's one of the main styles of Lolita. It's very cutesy, very pastel, lots of big bows, bear motifs, like pastry motifs. Very, very, very cutesy. But the big thing is the bright pastel colors, and most often you'll see pink. I feel like anytime I see a Sweet Lolita cord, there's at least a good bit of pink in there. So bittersweet Lolita. Um, I don't actually know how recent this term popped up. I think it's definitely a little bit more recent, like within the past 5 years or so. But bittersweet kind of has two different definitions, because there's a definition of what it meant by the person that first kind of coined the term, and more so what it means now. So what it originally meant, or just to give you the lore, I suppose, from my research, the term bittersweet Lolita was coined by someone, I don't know their name, and she made a blog post in which she was explaining she, technically speaking, wears only Sweet Lolita, but as far as her personal interests and just overall personal style and everything goes, she as a person feels very goth. So she kind of felt this disconnect from the fact that she liked how a lot of these sweet chords looked, but just, again, as a person, identified more with goth styles. Um, so a lot of brands that release mostly sweet dresses, Angelic Pretty is a really big one. They sometimes will release a dress, obviously in the pastel colors, but they'll release that same dress where it has a black background and then it's the pastel designs over the black. Um, so she said that she really prefers those types of dresses where visually it is more so black, because most of the dress will be black, but you have all the pastel designs kind of popping out from it. So that's why she coined the term bittersweet Lolita, because she felt like just sweet didn't match her vibe, because she doesn't like just only straight pastels. um, I mean, she even said herself that like all the cutesy frills and bows make her want to vomit. So that's like a quote from her. So she liked the term bittersweet Lolita, and she felt like that defined her style of Lolita better. Um, Now a lot of people didn't like this. They got kind of mad at her for this. Basically, they were like calling her a pick me girl and saying that she was trying to like appear like superior to other sweet Lolitas, and like again just like pick me girl, trying to seem like she's better or different or quirky, whatever. Um, Now I don't know her intentions exactly. I wasn't there for it, but I found it a little hard to believe that she had such malintentions with that. I think, at least from, because I read like her original blog post, from everything that I was reading, I really didn't get that vibe that she was like out to be mean or like try to be better than anyone. I think it just is genuinely as she described of, I don't like all the bright colors and pastels and overly cutesiness so much. That's a bit too much for me personally. And I mean, I'm confusing if it's her that said it or a Reddit comment, but is more so that it's kind of hard to explain to people like, oh, I wear Sweet Lolita, but actually like mostly black, but I still like the pastels, but I have to wear black. Like, like it was getting complicated for them to describe their styles. So it would make sense to just coin a term to describe your style, you know? Um, so that's kind of the way that I see it, where bittersweet Lolita is definitely valid, and just that it is a variation of Sweet Lolita. It visually does look different, and it is, it's not. it's not so crazy to be like to try to just coin a different term to explain a different style, you know. Um, but also to be fair, her original idea of Bittersweet Lolita wasn't even so much about black, but still with like the pastels and everything. She liked black with, I guess, like more classic motifs. So more so like florals and like that kind of like flower colors and stuff like that. Um, so it's honestly more so been in more recent times as other people have like self-identified with Bittersweet Lolita that it's steered in the direction of, like I said, black background dress with cutesy pastel designs. Um, so yeah, I mean, at least according to this Reddit thread, which to be fair, it's from like 3 years ago, um, people just really don't like it. And I've seen this a lot with the Lolita community, where they don't like when people want to create a new substyle or define something differently from other substyles because I mean honestly they give a whole bunch of reasons and I feel like it usually tends to be pretty silly. Um but I mean again I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but I don't understand why it would be such an issue to want to just have a word to better describe the way you identify yourself, especially when it comes to something like Lolita, where kind of the only way that you're going to find the dresses in the styles and colors that you want is if there's a way to describe them. So, even if I were to just look up black and pastel Lolita dresses, like I'm probably not going to find as much versus, I mean, even here I have a tab pulled up. If I just look up Bittersweet Lolita, I'll get the results of, like I just described, the black dress with the pastels. Um, so, let's see. Okay, sorry, this is one other thing that I wanted to mention. A lot of, well, okay, not a lot of people, but a couple people have mentioned that they seem to be a little bit more so confused about what Bittersweet Lolita is or what it's trying to be because they'll just be like, oh, like this is just pastel goth. This is just pastel goth. No, it's not. Um, which I know is like such a silly distinction, but pastel goth is spooky goth imagery, but it's fully pastel. Like even though it has the goth part in the name, I feel like it's not so often that you see people mixing in black with their pastel goth outfits. Like yes, they definitely do, but I feel like pastel goth is very very heavy on the pastel part of it. Um, versus bittersweet. Bittersweet is almost more heavy on the black colors of it, because it's trying to differentiate itself visually from sweet, which is all about the pastels. So I wouldn't equate it to pastel goth. I get what they mean of once again just like a dark pastel cutesy style, but I do think there's still a bit of distinction to be made there. Um, that was nasty. I'm sorry. But on the topic of pastel goth, um, I kind of wanted to just talk in general about um these sort of just I guess the phenomenon of, like I said, dark themes, dark aesthetics turned cutesy, whether it's in a cartoonish way or in a pastel way, whatever it may be, it's just cutified. Because there's a lot of these styles. There's like a lot of these styles. So obviously, like I just said, pastel goth. Um, there's another Japanese style. It's called yami kawaii. That more so just means like sickly cute. Um, even another substyle of Lolita is called Guro Lolita, and that just kind of means like grotesque. So Guro Lolita tends to include, I mean, I guess gore in a way. You'll see it pretty much sticks to a mostly white and red with like a little bit of black here and there. As far as the colors, because you'll have like a white dress with like a blood splatter design, or it'll include also like hospital imagery, so like syringes, the like old fashioned nurse hats, even like blood bags, eyeballs, eye patches, bandages, that kind of thing. Yamikuai is similar in the idea that it will include, like I said, that kind of hospital imagery of, again, like syringes, eye patches, bandages, whatever. But it's really interesting to me because there is a manga. It's called Menhara-chan. I forget the creator's name, but he pretty much like paved the way for Yami Kawaii. Um, he released his manga Menhara-chan, and it's essentially about magical girls that cut themselves to get their magical transformation. Their magical girl wands is literally like a box cutter. Um, so it does surround a lot about mental illness, self harm, suicidal stuff. Um, but it's, the creator has said, it's more of like event art kind of thing. At least from what I understand, it's not at all meant to like glorify self harm or these darker themes or whatever. It's just he himself was already kind of an outcast. Um, and so, that was sort of an outlet. But just coincidentally, Manhattan also has sort of a pastel color palette to the art style. So that just fit right in with the Yami Kawaii aesthetic. So that I say all that to say that a big part of Yami Kawaii images like that you'll see in clothing designs or artwork or whatever else, on top of the kind of hospital imagery that I mentioned, it's also going to include, like I said, the, it's supposed weird to say it like this, but I guess like the mental health imagery. So again, like razor blades or nooses or like things like that. But I mean, these are really interesting styles to me. I've always been a huge fan of anything to do with something dark and terrible turned all cutesy, because like it's kind of fire. Like it kind of just goes hard every time. Like especially even just Madoka Magica. If any of you guys have seen that, like Madoka Magica goes hard, bro. Like watching these little lolly girls freaking dealing with some crazy happenings. Like it's insane. I can't even explain it. Madoka Magic is fire. And it's just like I said, these kind of aesthetics are just very appealing to me. Um, and I was reading an article where it was talking about Yami Kawaii, and it was especially talking about um, Yami Kawaii kind of came about with, Japan obviously has a very big kawaii culture in general, but especially like 80s to 90s, that was kind of like the peak of the kawaii craze. That's when characters like Hello Kitty were coming out around that time. But at a certain point, kawaii craze did start to die down a little bit in Japan. Obviously, I think in general it stayed to this day. It's remained, but it just wasn't at the absolute peak of popularity that it used to be. So kind of as kawaii started to phase out, Yami Kawaii took its place. And we see that, okay, like even just how I was talking about Madoka Magica, we see that like one to one within magical girl shows, because older magical girl animes, obviously Sailor Moon being one of the biggest ones, but even thinking about like Revolutionary Girl Utna, it was you know, they had the cutesy imagery going on and everything. And while yes, like the characters did still have struggles, and there might have been like a little bit of like darker themes going on or whatever, it they weren't like as in your face about it. And at the end of the day, it was still about these girls and their magical friendship power saving the day, saving the world, whatever. Um, but I honestly do feel like Madoka Magic itself was the start of the shift towards magical girl animes just being real edgy, like as angsty as possible. And once again, I'm so here for that. But because then we have like Madoka Magica, obviously. Wonder Egg Priority is another good one. I'm blanking out. There's a really popular one. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me. But I know now there's been like several of these magical girl animes that, like I said, are like very upfront about their darker like subject matter. And I was reading something that was talking about, maybe why this shift might have happened. Um, and oh my god, brain fart. um, basically, it was, you know, I guess sure this might not be confirmed, but at least a theory as to why there's been this sudden shift into these bright and happy magical girl shows getting all dark and angsty, is adding in more mature, subject matter into these shows. That in a weird way that makes it a little more palpable for audiences. Anyone that's not off the bat going to be interested in a magical girl show, because I get that that's not for everyone. Um, like there's been times where myself I'm recommending Madoka Magica or Wonder Egg Priority to people, and I'm like, hear me out. It is a magical girl show, but it's real gnarly. It's real messed up. It's crazy. So I feel like that does help people in a weird way want to take a look at it and see what it's about. Because especially at the very least, in the idea of like just a morbid curiosity, people like content that kind of subverts your expectations. Um, so yeah, I think that's a big reason why a lot of people gravitate towards the endless list of dark and cutesy styles, because it's I would personally see it as, like I said, subverting your expectations. I think that's why I like it, like the almost irony that comes with it of like, oh my god, it's some crazy, like this girl is like doing some weird stuff over here, but she's super cute. She's super cute in pastel. So like I don't know, it's just it's almost funny to me. But let me check my notes here. Let me see what I got for y'all. Um yeah, so I mean, just to kind of go back to what I was saying about the different Lolita styles, I think it's interesting that there's so many substyles of Lolita, which I also think is great because that, especially for anyone that is interested in Lolita, like they could just type Lolita fashion into the Google search bar and they'll get so many variations of what Lolita can look like because now we have so many different substyles. But I mean, to be fair, the Lolita community has not always been the most friendly. There's definitely been some not so nice people over the years, but I think it has gotten a lot better. Um, so I guess considering that there have been quite a few elitists, at least back in the day, I understand why. There's been this apprehension to other substyles of Lolita, but more than anything, I hope that like we can kind of come to our senses a little bit and be like, it's just fashion, bro. Like it's it's just fashion. It's clothes. It's not that serious, you know. Obviously, yes, I would agree that there are certain rules to follow when it comes to wearing Lolita, just in terms of like what it's supposed to look like. You know, the typical outfit pieces that you would need to put something together. Um, but even within those rules, I feel like there's so much room for freedom of expression, and I feel like that should be even more encouraged. Um, because it's odd to me that for people for an entire fashion subculture, a group of people that really like fashion, they seem to want to limit people's fashion, which like I don't know, it just that like just saying it out loud sounds so backwards to me because I'm like, if you really like fashion for yourself, but also for other people, wouldn't you want to encourage people to grow and expand within that? Like, I don't get it. So I don't know. I would say that's about all I had to talk about. I just wanted to touch on, you know, those few Lolita substyles. Like I said, just overall any kind of aesthetic that has dark themes made cutesy. People's thoughts and opinions on it overall. Um, but all right, just to run through the bullet points for you. Aero Lolita is not weird. It's not trying to sexualize the style. I do agree that there's some people that have gone too far, but then we don't have to include them in the conversation because it's obviously not Lolita in any manner. So we don't even need to like talk about that. We can just leave that one out. When it comes to actual legitimate Aero Lolita, I think it looks good 9 times out of 10. And I think it should be encouraged more because, again, freedom of expression, experimentation, all that good stuff. Y'all are just being weird. Um, and then to my second point, military Lolita, once again, just don't make real life war uniforms and you should be fine. That's really it. Just don't cosplay pre existing soldiers and you should be good. Aside from that, military Lolita is fire. I think it's so cool. I personally want to get a dress and a whole cord for myself. So stay tuned for that, I guess. um, and then for bittersweet Lolita, kind of same thing. Bro, experimentation. People are gonna have different vibes, different styles. They're not going to always connect with the pre-existing labels, so they might want to just kind of make a label for themselves, so they don't have to give a whole description every single time someone asks their style of Lolita. Um, and honestly, I would genuinely love to see brands releasing more specifically bittersweet Lolita, like even including some more like spooky designs, especially for Halloween. I think that'd be amazing. Of just some very like cutesy Halloween prints and stuff like that. So I don't see why bittersweet can't be part of the whole shebang. And yeah, I mean, because even this like Reddit thread here, a person said like the OP that just all they asked was why is bittersweet so controversial, and then according to them, like they were getting a ton of hate for it, which is crazy that you're just curious. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, it's a cool style. It doesn't hurt to want to just be more specific and define yourself a little bit better. And like I said, overall, I think 9 times out of 10, it doesn't hurt to take a kind of darker theme and make it cutesy. I think that's super cool. I think it can also just be a great creative outlet for a lot of people. Um, so yeah, I would say overall, that's my thoughts. That's my thoughts on the things. um, Let me know if you guys want to just hear me yap more often about fashion related things, alternative subculture related things, art related things, anything at all. I am a big fat yapper, so let me know. Thanks for watching.